and the brain scan revealed a tumour. I think it was about 3, but at school I felt like I was a bit of a leper in a sense. I kind of stood out. Like it. But I think one thing that I'd had at that point was my career was all linear, and I wasn't prepared for when things went wrong.
Would you say that climbing the mountain has been worth the view for you then?
The only way I'm not making it is I can't control what you guys are doing, but you're going to have to fight like hell to beat me because I can't see it. Like I had this bulletproof mentality that I feel like that decision will haunt me for a long time, and but to be able to fully move on and try again if I wanted to, I need to be able to let go of all those demons first, and I know that I'm not ready for that yet. You don't have to make these amazing, massive changes to be able to be better. What you have to do is just...
So I'm really excited and incredibly honoured to have one of our most remarkable guests on our show today. As you will hear, his journey is truly astonishing, and it will be an absolute inspiration to us all. It's with great pleasure to welcome Jay Lelliott to the show to share his secrets and sacrifices of his professional swimming journey so far, and much, much more. So Jay, welcome to the show. Before we start the show, my children have come up with 10 quick fire would you rather questions so the viewers can get to know you just a little bit better. And because it's a family portrait, I've got my eldest boy Mason who's going to ask you the questions today. So I'm going to hand you over to Mason now.
Oh, very, very nervous. Okay.
I think you should be with the questions that they wrote for you today.
Good start. I've already knocked the headphones off me head. Okay.
Would you rather game or read a book?
Game, 100%.
That's what I would have choose as well. Win $1 million or earn $1 million?
Earn $1 million. Nothing more satisfying.
Have a takeaway or eat out?
Eat out. It's more of an experience, isn't it?
Listen to Stormzy or Drake?
I'm going to go Drake. I quite like Drake, you know.
Wear Nike or Adidas?
Ooh, Nike, I'll probably say.
Own a Bugatti or a Lamborghini?
I think watching Top Gear, seeing the Bugatti Veyron and stuff like that, I think it would have to be that just because of, Top Gear.
Do cardio or lift weights?
Anything that's a own physical challenge, you know, I think cardio for me, from swimming and running, you know, definitely.
Play Spider-Man or the Incredible Hulk in a Marvel film?
Spider-Man, he's just iconic, isn't he? You know, you can't get more iconic than Spider-Man.
Meet Michael Phelps or Mark Spitz?
I haven't met Michael Phelps, but I've probably got to say Michael Phelps. He's my idol. He's the person who I've looked up for the whole of my career. I did once walk past him, and I was like absolutely in awe, and like he was probably just looking at me like, "Who's this freak staring at me?" But yeah.
Swim in the 400 meters or 1,500 meter distance?
Ooh, I really enjoy, not many people do, and I know this is a very unpopular opinion in the swimming world, but I really enjoy the 1500. I think when there's a good 1500 race to watch, there is nothing better. So yeah, I really would love to be to be able to do that at the 1500, yeah. But also the 4 is great as well. They're both my main events.
Super. So I'll pinch that now, Mason.
Oh, that was great. Oh, okay. I can breathe now. That was good.
It's easy from there on in now.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Mason. Are you going to say bye-bye?
Cheers, Mason. Bye. Have a good one.
Okay. So we put the 400 meters one. and the 1500 one, because we knew your first national senior medal at 18 was your 1500 meters, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
And then your first international senior medal
Hmm.
was at the 400.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we
yeah.
didn't know if there was any specific kind of affinity that you had with the 400 or the 1500. So
Hmm.
when we was like kind of reading up, the boys were thinking, "Oh, we'll put that one in there just to see what he
Yeah.
says." So
Well, and the thing is with it as well, it's quite transferable. Like it's not like athletics where you pick like one distance, maybe you can get away with two.
yeah,
It's more like you can transfer them fairly easily.
right,
So
okay,
with the training volume that I was doing, it's probably up to like 70K a week, just over sometimes
wow,
in the pool. Like that kind of meant that I was fit enough. But if we
yeah,
transferred it the right way, you had the speed for it too.
right,
So
okay,
yeah, it was really really intense, but
yeah.
it was quite transferable. So
Oh, right, okay, cool.
mhm.
Um, so as you know, the podcast is to shine the light on the secrets and sacrifices all families go through to allow
Mhm.
their children to become elite level athletes, and something that's really close to our hearts at the moment with having 4 children currently on that journey.
Mhm.
So the question that I've been asking our previous guests is, where did your story begin? So could you take me back to your childhood when you was growing up at home and what things were like living at home, and what actually made you fall in love with swimming?
Okay, I think so. I've to start with this story. I think I've got a kind of, and I'll give you a bit of a history of how I knew that swimming or like individual sports were more for me.
Okay.
And I remember playing. I'm from a little island in Dorset called Portland.
Right, okay.
It's not really an island, but yeah, I'm not going to go into that. And yeah, it's I was playing for this football team called I think it was the Portland Panthers, and I played for them from like the age of like 8 through to 11 or 12. And I started as an attacker,
Right,
and I
okay.
scored 0 goals in that first season. I started in the midfield. I scored 0 goals in my second season. Then defense, 0 goals, and was pretty rubbish. And then I finally found my calling for about a season and a half in goal. And ironically, that was the only place I ever scored a goal from.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. And that wasn't like a penalty. That was like from the goal line. I just did a football
Wow.
kick in a tournament, and
Yeah.
what's it called? Goal kick. Sorry, yeah. And it ended up going all right. But yeah, that kind of like started where I just knew I didn't really enjoy football.
Right.
And I basically did this. We did this tiny swimming gala when I was 9 at this I don't know how do I describe it. So it was my local school swimming pool, and it was really it was small. It was like we were racing 5 or 6 meters,
Right, okay.
and I remember losing to this kid called I think it was Jack Townsend or something like that, and like it was just obviously it was a bit of fun, but like
Yep.
it's weird I can still remember that, and
I was going to say it's a bit of fun, but you can still remember his name.
yeah, and like don't get me wrong, like well, I don't talk to this kid anymore, like or
Yep.
anything. I don't dislike him or anything like that. Don't get me
Yep.
wrong at all, but like, yeah, like it's just weird, like how I still remember that memory so
Yeah. Yeah.
vividly. And I asked my mum and my dad to get me into swimming lessons, and it took 18 months. So I finally heard back from them. I got off the waiting list when I was 11,
Okay.
and yeah, it was like a hat. Then you had to go into like this hat structure. So slowest was like yellow hats, then orange, then red, and then you work your way up to blue. And they're at the top of the pool doing like probably about 40, 50 widths a session, which I thought was mental at that
Yeah.
time. And yeah, I got up there, and I think I lasted in the hats for about 3 or 4 months, which
Okay.
normally takes swimmers about a couple of years to get out of. But
Wow.
also, I came to the sport a lot later than a lot of other people. So I had that physical advantage, I'd say. And yeah, I just absolutely loved it. I loved being able to push myself and knowing that whatever I was doing, I was kind of responsible for.
Yep.
And like, I honestly don't know if that's what I was thinking at the time, but
Yep.
I just knew that having a team that was so disappointed in me after finishing a football match if I'd let loads of goals in, or elated with me if I'd done well, like was
Yep.
fine, but I just wanted to be responsible for myself.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of how it sparked, I guess, my enjoyment for it, because I just felt like from the get-go I was
Yeah.
okay at it.
Okay.
So yeah, that's it. I know it's quite long-winded, but yeah.
No, no. Were your mum and dad sporty? Were they from a sporty background? Were they ever involved in, like, say, swimming, for instance, or any other sports? Or
So my mum was never sporty.
okay,
She did like recreational swimming when she was younger.
yep,
Like in her late teens, like probably for about 5 or 6 years. She quite
okay,
enjoyed the swimming side of things. But yeah, no history in sport. And my
right,
dad, I don't know actually how much training he did, but
yep.
he did county long jumping,
Oh,
and
okay,
yeah, he won counties one year in long jump. And I'll never forget, I think he told me his best was like 6 meters and 19 or something like that
right,
for a long jump. But he never took it seriously, and he never really wanted to do it, I don't think. It's just like he rocked up and was good at it. So
right, okay. So
yeah,
he was just
yeah,
naturally gifted.
yeah. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
I honestly, I don't know. I've just always worked really hard for whatever I've
yep,
got, I guess. And like
yeah.
that's, I guess, what's motivated me more than anything.
Yeah. So do you know, during your school days, can you
Hmm.
remember how much training you was doing during the days? And did you ever miss any, like, kind of school because of, like, kind of competitions, or like kind of your training schedule?
So where I was from was a lot smaller in terms of like other places. So like, you
Okay.
go to private schools, you
Yep.
go to some places in the UK and there is a 50-meter pool on your doorstep, or there is a centre that is set up specifically to
Yep.
like a club that's set up specifically for like performance swimming. And my home club was this club called the Tornadoes of South Dorset,
Yep.
and they were actually really good. They had like 5 or 6 swimmers every year that got to nationals, but they weren't
Okay.
like um insane. They were like
Yep.
just doing the best they could with what they
Okay.
had. And yeah, it was good. The maximum I was able to train though was 6 times a week in the pool, and we would maybe have one land session, which would be really easy stuff.
Okay.
And that was only up to the age of 17, so the year
Okay.
before I went to university.
Yep.
So no, I actually never really had to miss school for
Okay.
anything. It was all I was never really good enough either at that point.
Right. Okay.
Um, my journey up until the age of 18 focused solely around enjoyment and just trying to get the best out of myself with what time I had.
Yep.
And like that's a big part of my message that I now have, because you've
Yep.
got to be able to enjoy what you do to be able to
Yeah.
be good at it, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm quite lucky in the sense I didn't have any issues like that. I did have, as you know, I had a few with health issues and stuff
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
coming into it. But yeah, not too much in terms of missing school.
So was that how your parents kind of continued the journey for you? Were they of the opinion that you need to kind of enjoy your sport rather than being a so-called, say, pushy parent who was getting you to do, like, all your training and, like, probably like your S&C stuff? Was it more from, like, say, yourself, where this kind of motivation to kind of train and to do your kind of hours and things came from?
Yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
so. Yeah. I don't get me wrong. I think I wouldn't say my dad was a pushy parent, but he was
Yep.
involved.
Okay.
He really enjoyed, I think, just being involved in the sporting world.
Yep.
Not just with swimming. When I say I played football from 8 to 12, he
Yep.
was the assistant coach on the team.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and I think he only became that after the first year. He got some sort of qualification or something, and then
Yep.
knew what he was talking about from there. So. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's always been one of those guys who I think just wanted to be part of my journey in
Yeah.
a bit more
Okay.
of a sense like that. But yeah, I wouldn't really describe him as too pushy, particularly early on in my journey. Trust me, there
Okay.
were some arguments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was some, where he wanted me to do, not necessarily wanted me to do better, but like, wish I was more organized, because that was probably one of
Yeah.
my big weaknesses.
Yeah.
But yeah, not too much in the pushy side.
Would he
And
would
my
he
mum was
offer
really amazing.
Would he offer, like, kind of feedback on your performances then? Because this is, I think, with, say, three of my children we've got my eldest that's 15 doing tennis, and we've got my two boys
Hmm.
that are 10 and 11. Our youngest isn't into kind of performance kind of sport, albeit she's
Hmm.
enjoying her activities at the moment. I always want to be really honest with my children.
Hmm.
However, sometimes if they've not performed particularly well,
Hmm.
and I feel they should have kind of tried harder or worked a little bit better or concentrated on something in particular that they've been working on.
Hmm.
I always find it hard getting that do you know, kind of balance of being honest,
Hmm.
but not being too kind of critical
Yeah.
with them. Was Did your dad kind of offer advice when you'd kind of done, say, like one of you say swimming races, and you may not have kind of performed as well as what you thought? Would he offer kind of advice? And you mentioned about kind of fallings out. I mean, with my eldest, we've fallen out a number of times.
Yeah.
So I used to do the tennis training with my eldest when she was younger.
Hmm.
We used to do like all the S&C stuff together as well. And I
Hmm.
remember numerous times where we'd be kind of going out at, say, like 6:30 in the morning.
Hmm.
We'd be at the tennis courts for, say, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And by 7:15, 7:20, we're back in the car because we've like fallen out. She might be a bit tired
Yeah.
because she's got up early before school,
Hmm.
and I feel as if she's not training hard enough.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking like, oh, I've got to do like all my work. So then I get a bit frustrated, and it's like,
Yeah.
right, come on, we're just kind of going home.
Yeah.
So that's the bit that I kind of struggle with, trying to get that balance right of offering
Hmm.
enough kind of criticism,
Yeah.
but in a nice kind of balanced way. So how did
Yeah.
that work for you, for like your relationship with your dad?
It was probably a bit there's probably quite a lot of friction involved. Yeah, it was quite tough to balance, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah,
My dad watched, I think, virtually every single session I did at the pool because
yeah,
it was really, really local to where we
yeah.
used to live.
Hmm.
And he would be equally as frustrated as some others, no, as I would be sometimes if I didn't do well. But I think the big thing for me was because I had to be self-critical of my own performance,
Yep,
it was mainly what he was telling me was what I already kind of knew.
yep,
And yeah, but often I didn't understand why.
yep,
The person who normally told me why was my coach, and
yep.
it was a
Okay,
coach called Phil Daniels back in the day,
okay,
and he was really, really good at just helping me understand what I was doing well and what I was doing bad.
okay.
And the friction probably came from my dad saying like a couple of things that weren't what he'd said, what my coach had said, but like that was his opinion on it. And like
Yeah,
when you're young, and trust me, because I mentor now, I can see both sides, and I
yeah,
understand that it must be such a difficult line for a parent to skirt. I now see that like normally when it comes to telling or giving your kid advice or anything along those lines, you just almost, I know for me when I was younger, I almost out of spite wanted to do the opposite.
yeah, yeah,
And I honestly thought I was just a little brat, honestly. But I've now kind of seen more and more as I mentor that
yeah,
when you're young, you basically get it in the ear, or you chat to your parents about it a lot through, like not just sport. You talk to them about everything
yeah,
outside. You go
yeah,
home, they're there.
yeah,
You almost want that new opinion, and I
yeah,
think that's where like even though I'm probably saying similar things to like what a parent may say, like trying to find that mentoring role when I do my
yeah,
athlete mentoring,
yeah,
um, it's easier for them to hear coming from me than
yeah,
it is coming from a parent, I think. And
yeah,
that was
yeah,
where me and my dad had our issues because
yeah,
his thoughts were, I'm saying this out of the best interest for you.
yeah,
And probably, I don't know if this is true, but probably I'm putting my time, I'm putting my effort, putting resources into making sure you can do your best.
yeah, yeah,
And you've got to give a bit back almost, like you got to listen
yeah,
to me. And when I've got multiple stimuli and multiple in things, and also if I'm saying a performance has gone bad, I'm going to be emotional anyway. How
yeah,
it's like picking the right time, picking the right
yeah,
place,
yeah,
like how much effort do I put in, like how do I come at it from. So yeah, I think it was probably like, I know it was all from the best interest, but
yeah,
yeah, it
yeah.
was it was often come to a couple of arguments, I imagine. So yeah.
Right. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So the next question is, you've kind of briefly touched on it. Your swimming journey began at the age of 11
Hmm.
years old for the Tornadoes of South Dorset.
Yeah.
However, this is where your story kind of gets really interesting and quite astonishing. Like I said at the start of the show, at the age of 13, you needed two operations to remove a brain tumor.
Yeah.
However, remarkably, 2 years later, you reached your first nationals finals You've also had radio surgery as recent as 2022, and you've constantly been monitored since, say, 2007. So, could you just kind of give myself and the viewers and listeners just a little insight into what was kind of going through your mind at the time, and how you kind of controlled things personally and like kind of mentally to kind of come through at the other side and continue competing. And when I say competing to people, it wasn't just competing at the local kind of pools either. I mean, you kicked on from there to racing like the Olympic trials in 2012, which you say really kind of ignited your passion for the sport, which when you kind of read and listen to the stories, it's such an amazing kind of story to kind of hear. So could you just kind of take me back a little bit to then and just kind of give us a bit of an insight into that if you could?
Yeah, of course. Well, firstly, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, with particularly with what you're talking about with London as well, like, that was possibly where my dream of like, making as far as I
Yeah,
have in the sport was properly seen.
yeah,
I guess I didn't really see it as too different there, but yeah, taking it way back to 2007.
yeah.
Yeah, God, that's too many. 16 years ago. Wow. That makes me feel a bit older. But yeah, so when in 2006, 2007, my parents started to notice like one or two like strange behaviors about me, and
Okay,
so like I was like talking to them, and all of a sudden I'd go vacant for like 10 to 15 seconds.
okay,
And sometimes I don't know if this is true, but this is always how I remember it. I would have like this like weird kind of clapping moment, like where I would like almost like laugh hysterically and do
okay.
a bit of a clap. And this would last again for about another 10, 15 seconds, and then I would come around having no recollection of what had happened.
Right.
And what later transpired from that was my parents found out that I had absence epilepsy.
Okay.
And it was all okay. Like, it just had basically it was just I needed people around me to make sure that I knew when I was having one, or like,
Yep.
just in case like I was safe and all that stuff. So I went on medication, and after that it didn't really affect me too much. But what we did find out from that is when I had a brain scan,
Yep.
and the brain scan revealed a tumor. I think it was about 3 by 4 by 2 centimeters, something
Right.
along those lines. I feel like that was the right measurement, and
Okay.
it was between my front. I think it was in between my frontal lobes or something
Okay.
like that. Yeah, there's a couple of lobes in the brain. When I see the scans, I think of it as like a triangle.
Yep.
So there's this like shape like that,
Okay.
and the tumor was laying around there
Right.
towards
Okay.
between these two lobes here.
Yep.
And yeah, so in 2008, I had to have two surgeries to remove this tumor. So it's meant I spent, well, the first surgery was, the goal was always to get it out the first time.
Yep.
And I went down to Southampton and I had this surgery, and it was successful in the fact that they managed to get most of it out, but there was
Okay.
still a quite a sizable chunk. I think it's more like 1 by 1 by 1 after that, still in there. So yeah, so I had the surgery, probably had about 3 weeks off school, 3 or 4 weeks off school.
Okay.
Had dissolvable stitches in my head, 20 stitches from there to there. I mean, I'm not sure if you've got me, if you've seen my most recent Instagram post. I've done a
Yeah.
post of the photo
Yeah. Yeah.
of the scar, and it shows the extent of it
Yeah.
basically. And yeah, so that was that year, and it was mental. And like, to be honest, I have so much respect for my parents as well, because the amount that they had to go through that year was ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
my mum refers to 2008 as the worst year of her life, because that happened. She also lost her mum, and
Wow.
my parents actually separated that year as well.
Right. Okay.
And one thing that's not shown on the information that you probably found about me
Yeah.
is that I also had another surgery in that year, which isn't actually on the system. I had to have a kidney biopsy,
Right.
because I was basically kept in hospital for like 4 or 5 days, and they were monitoring, like, making sure like whatever was coming in was going out, like, so I wasn't losing any liquids and
Yep.
stuff. and they did a blood test, and I think they found that I had it was something stupid, like I had 50 times the amount of creatine or something along those lines as a normal person. I think it was creatine.
Right. Okay.
Um, I'm going to look really silly if that was the wrong thing, but this is all how I remember it. I've not really
Yep.
spoke to my parents about it since. And yeah, I had to have kidney biopsy to make sure that everything was working all right down there. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, first one was in the February. That was the brain surgery, and then 2-3 weeks out of the pool. But I remember going down to the pool and watching a session, and
Yep.
just I have this really good friend called Chris Perham, and he's he's a really good triathlete. He's
Yep.
competing in the World Series. I think he do you know the London Triathlon?
Yep.
He won that a few years ago.
Right.
And
Okay.
he's really good, really good at what he does. But at that time we were both just swimmers, and
Yeah.
I remember going to the pool. He was my arch nemesis, you know. And I remember seeing him training, and I was like, I want to get back to racing as soon as possible because I don't want to let him beat me the next time I
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
And basically, I think that's what just sped up my training. And I talk about all this like I was very self-aware,
Yep.
but I was actually very simple as a kid. All I knew
Yep.
was I wanted to swim. You know, I
Yep.
wanted to be back in that environment because it's what I love doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, I didn't have the easiest upbringing as well, so it was just my escape really as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and then the second surgery happened in that I think it was around Christmas time that year,
Okay.
and that finally dispelled the end of everything for a little while. And then what happens is after 4, 5, 6 month reviews, you then extend it to 12. Then after a couple of them, you extend it to 18,
Yeah.
and it keeps
Okay.
going like that. And then that's how the monitoring
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was basically my journey
So,
at that point. But yeah.
so there must have been there's a real kind of intrinsic motivation there then to keep on going, isn't there? Really,
Yeah.
because I think if you speak to say many people.
Hmm.
That you could probably kind of walk past in the street, or if you was to kind of go to a shopping centre. I think
Hmm.
after everything that you'd kind of been through, there'd be quite a lot of people that wouldn't want to kind of continue that kind of journey. They'd almost want to kind of go, do you know, a little bit within themselves. Whereas
Hmm.
you kind of flipped it around completely the other way, and actually saw that one of your kind of arch nemesis, as you'd said, may kind of get a little bit further away from you. So you wanted to kind of get
Hmm.
back into the pool as kind of quick as you could.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously you did that with obviously kind of competing in the time trials for the Olympics in kind of 2012. So
Yeah.
to be able to do that off the back of it,
Hmm.
that's a amazing kind of kind of motivation and that kind of desire and passion to want to kind of continue with that as well as everything else that you've just said that you was kind of going through at the time as well. So my next question that I'm gonna ask you, what I've asked a few other of the guests that we've had on is, would you say that slightly different for yourself? I could imagine. However, would you say your professional swimming journey allowed you to have a normal childhood growing up? Kind of probably taken away from kind of the surgery and the brain tumor,
Hmm.
all you kind of say training that you used to do, all the kind of commitment of kind of doing all your kind of hours in the pool and say S&C stuff.
Hmm.
Only from speaking to kind of previous guests, what we've kind of heard is that they make so many sacrifices along the way, from kind of coming home after training, all the friends are going out. However, they can't go out and kind of play out almost because they need to refuel. They need an early night because then they're back training in the morning. So we had Danny Evans,
Hmm.
professional basketballer, on a couple of shows ago. And he mentioned that he would be up at say 6 o'clock in the morning doing all his S&C stuff before all
Hmm.
his friends were kind of awake, and then he'd kind of go to school, he'd do his normal kind of school day, then he'd start training again.
Hmm.
And his friends could never really get their heads around him doing all this training and getting up at the times that he did. However, now all his
Hmm.
friends can see that he's this professional basketballer. He's going to Germany in May, I think it is, next month. He goes to Germany training again.
Hmm.
So would you say you had like a normal childhood with regards to the training for swimming?
Um, so I think once I started swimming, I think that's when I kind of started getting more of a grip of
Okay,
my, well, I'd say one, my identity at the time. I definitely identified more as a swimmer as anything
okay,
else.
yep,
But also I'd probably say it's when I finally stopped taking everything at school. Like, I still took it seriously, but like I didn't take the relationships and stuff like that with people as seriously. And I basically I kind of didn't have the easiest school time. I had a great group of friends outside of
okay,
school, or like they were all
yep,
different ages to me, because in my road which I grew up on,
yep,
I had this amazing group of friends, and we had such a good childhood,
yep,
like some amazing holidays and stuff like that. And this is
okay,
from as young as like 7, well,
yep,
probably like 6 or 7, all the way up until like 16. um so yeah, there was a really incredible journey in that sense. But at
yep,
school, I felt like I was a bit of a leper in a sense. I kind of stood out, and I took things way too personally. And
okay,
yeah, I'm looking back on that. I looked back and I was like, oh, I could have handled that so much better if I knew what I did
yeah,
now. But obviously, like, you don't know that when you're a kid, do you?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Swimming was basically my outlet from all of that, I think,
okay,
and it allowed me to like kind of just be a bit more tame, a bit more controlled in
yep,
in school. Um, so yeah, I think, to be honest, when we talk about identity and stuff like that, because I identified a lot as a swimmer, and
yep,
I saw a lot of my swimming friends outside of no inside of the pool,
yep,
and then we had like presentation evenings, and like, we went away on like swimming competitions and like that together.
yep,
That was kind of my escape, because my best friends were coming away with me to a lot of these competitions. And the things that did suck when it comes to school, and the sacrifices, and what you're saying about, the professional basketballer who had to
yep,
basically watch like with me, I had to watch my friends go and do loads of other things. And like,
yep,
what stung the most was like, it wasn't necessarily the going, no, they're not going to things.
yep,
It was when the kids realize that you're not going to be able to go, so they stop inviting you.
yeah, yeah,
And that's what hurts more than anything.
yep,
And I remember there was probably a few times when I'd get very emotional about that kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, you know, um, but at the end of the day, I think that the best bit about it was being able to be with a lot of my really close friends during swimming was
okay,
worth it. And
right,
that's kind of how I differentiate from it, because school, I was quite clever. I was fairly clever. I wasn't massively above average. I loved maths.
yep,
And I had a couple of subjects that I was passionate about. But in terms of like wanting to excel and succeed there, that was all driven towards the pool.
right, okay,
And yeah, that kind of gave me the opportunity really to just treat it in a bit of a better sense. And like,
yep,
the sacrifices were a lot, but also in terms of like the athletes that I see and work with most days, because as I said, I didn't really elaborate on this, the small club that I came from, I wasn't
yep,
actually able to swim more than 6 times a week. So
okay,
my hourly my hourly time in the pool was probably about 12 hours up until the age of 17.
okay,
And then I moved for 1 year before I went to university to swim Bournemouth.
yep,
And in that year, I was doing 14 hours in the pool and 1 or 2 hours in the gym as well. But with that came a 70-mile round trip per
right, okay,
yeah per day, basically. Once more, no, one day it was twice a day as well. So yeah, and there was no days off, because I had this agreement with my coaches back at my old club that would still be able to do Sundays with them.
yep,
So yeah, Monday through Sunday, every single week, I was doing 2 hours in the pool. Probably having to give up a bit of weekend time if you think about it like that,
yeah,
because it was an awful time session. It was like 3 till 5 on a Sunday. Like, who wants to spend 3 till 5 on a Sunday at a pool? I
yeah,
mean, except for this guy, obviously.
yeah,
But yeah, yeah, it was a tough year. But like, and it was a tough kind of journey, but at the same time, I wouldn't change it.
yeah,
There's no way I would change it, because it kind of gave birth to the kind of athlete I became, you know.
Yeah. See, we hear that quite a lot with kind of the guests that we've kind of had on the show. So
Hmm.
all the kind of like professional journeys that they've been on, with whether it's the kind of competing, whether it's like kind of match days, whether it's with regards to the training schedules,
Hmm.
the they've all kind of highlighted that kind of sacrifice of. So like we've had quite a few footballers on who obviously they'll play on say like Boxing Day, or they'll play on like kind of on over Easter, so they can't enjoy like kind of having a drink at Christmas. Some of them have been training on like kind of Christmas Day,
Hmm.
and again, some of them have not been able to go on like say family holidays because they've
Hmm.
been almost worried that if they was away for kind of an amount of time, 2 3 weeks, then one of the trialists who was kind of coming in may take their place.
Hmm.
So the more that we speak to the kind of athletes, the more we kind of hear about all those little sacrifices that normally and usually people don't kind of hear about. They'll just see say they'll just see Jay on like
Hmm.
kind of the podium. They'll see Jay with like a gold
Hmm.
medal, or they'll see Jay doing X, Y, and Z, and they won't see all these other little kind of sacrifices that
Yeah.
kind of build up to make you to the person that you are today. So I'm going to read a list of a couple of things now. I was trying
Yeah.
to remember them all, but there's quite a few kind of accolades that I want to kind of get through. So I'm going to have to read some of them out so I don't
Can I
forget. So,
quickly just
of
say on that last point that you were
course you
saying there,
can.
one thing that like I did struggle with
Yep.
more when I was at school, in terms of like I guess it's not massively a sacrifice, but it comes a
Yep.
big part into my identity. And this is a part that I didn't actually enjoy as much.
Okay.
Was that I wasn't Jay.
Yep.
I wasn't that. It wasn't like an escape.
Yep.
I was Jay the swimmer.
Yep.
I was Jay the fish. I
Yep.
was Dolphin Boy, as my nickname was a few times, you know.
Right. Okay.
Like, and I did struggle with that more so.
Right.
I remember now, and this was a huge overreaction. One of my friends for a Secret Santa, like everyone was getting like chocolates and stuff like that. And looking back on this now, I find this absolutely hilarious. But for some reason at the time, I took it in such the wrong way.
Yep.
But my mates had got me some aquarium gravel,
Right. Okay.
because they thought it was like, oh, you'll just give him something for his home, like just mucking about. And I took
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
so personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's one of the, like when we talk about the sacrifices, like I guess that was the bit that I struggled with the most, because when we talk about identity,
Yep.
it's something that I'm probably still struggling with now, more particularly because I'm not a swimmer.
Yep.
Who am I without the sport?
Yep. Yep.
I recently I didn't necessarily call it, but I'm in limbo now with retirement,
Okay.
of what I want to do now. And I basically want to work out who I am before I
Yep.
make any decision about swimming or
Yeah.
anything like that first.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does
Well,
complicate things a bit.
I know we'll kind of touch it towards the end of the show. However, when you'd kind of spoke about your mentoring service, I think
Hmm.
because of how your journey has kind of unfolded to where you are today,
Hmm.
um, it's kind of like a perfect kind of avenue or kind of area to kind of get in, because you can kind of draw on so many kind of experiences,
Hmm.
kind of good and bad. And I think from them experiences, you can pass on so much knowledge to, they say, the younger athletes who you're wanting to kind of like help and progress and to kind of
Hmm.
be a better person
Hmm.
themselves. So it
Yeah.
kind of fits in quite nicely, that, doesn't it? However, I
Hmm.
was going to ask you a little bit about that a little bit later on. So
Yeah, yeah,
I
no
won't go
worries.
into too
Let's
much
go in that in
detail
a
on
bit.
that
Yeah,
one.
no stress. Yeah.
um, so, um, so I was going to say, from competing at your first nationals, as we've mentioned, at the age of 15,
Hmm.
winning medals at the World University Games, competing in the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow in 2014, competing in 3 consecutive European Championships and racing in the different time trials,
Hmm.
all amazing achievements in their own right. How do you personally cope with the peaks and troughs of the journey along the way? And were there ever any times where you kind of felt like kind of giving up, and obviously you didn't kind of give up? So what made you kind of continue that journey?
That's a great question. So just let me get my thoughts in order, just because I want to do this properly. I mean, firstly, one of the things that I will say is when you talk about me getting national medals as a junior,
Yeah.
like under the age of 18. That's
Yeah.
actually not quite right.
Okay.
So I made nationals from I made my first nationals at 15,
Yep.
and then 16 I made two national finals, I think.
Right. Okay.
With my best finish being 7th, but I was
Okay.
in a 200 fly, it was a 2 minute. I went 2:06 at that point. It was
Okay.
just over 2 minute race. I missed out, even though I was 7th, on a medal by 0.38 of a second. It was that close a final.
Yep.
And when I was 17, again, I made a couple of semi-finals at nationals, but
Yep.
that's the key year I'm going to talk about in a second as
Yep.
well.
Okay.
And then at 8, I'll talk about that now, and then I'll go on to the 18. But yeah, when I was 16, I did this phenomenal nationals performance. At the start of the year before, I was a 2:13 200 flyer, and I moved on
Okay.
7 seconds in the year to a 2:06. And in the
Wow.
heats, I went 2:07.5, and that qualified me for the final. No, for the semis in about
Yep.
third. And then I did the semi, and I was in a gold lane. I'd never been in a gold lane at a national competitions. For people who don't know what I mean, the two centre lanes, 4 and 5,
Yep.
are the gold lanes,
Yeah.
and I was in lane 5 of the
Okay.
first gold lane heat. So the two heats after me, there's another person like that. So I was like, wow, I'm actually in contention here. And I did this, yeah, and I did the semi, and I went 2:06.8, and I got faster again in the final. And it was a unreal experience, and I just
Yep.
absolutely loved the whole thing. And I think that's one of the first times I was like, I could do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and yeah, so I came 7th, and that was in the 200 fly, which is my best event. I can't remember what other event I finaled in. It might have been the 200 back, and I was like 9th or something like that in that.
Okay.
But yeah, I was quite far back. But I definitely finaled in 2 that year. And yeah, then it came to 17, and as we are talking about with the Olympic trials, the
Yep.
event that kind of kicked it all off, I went 2:05 again. I went 2:05 on the 200 fly there, which was a second PB, and I won my heat. There was only 3 of us in that heat. It was the slowest heat that I'd qualified for, but I still
Right.
did a good job, and I was still
Okay.
really happy with that. And I went to the watch the semi-finals and the finals that night,
Yep.
and it was at the London Aquatic Centre, so the Olympic venue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember not only coming up, I remember going up the stairs and hearing the announcer going crazy because there was a race on, like a really, really good race on. I think it was the semi-finals of the 200 free, and 200 free is like our blue ribboned event now in the
Right.
UK.
Okay.
And I remember going up and like seeing this amazing heat, turning to my left and seeing the pool. But more importantly, I'm looking down at the pool, and I can see out the corner of my eye something that doesn't feel almost natural. And I turn right, and I'm like looking up, and there's this like curtain, but behind the curtain, it's like one of those see-through ones, and you can
Right.
see up to this stand. And the pool, like bit that I could see, was the stand that holds 2,500 people, which is the London Aquatic Centre
Right.
today.
Okay. Yeah.
But this bit was the extra wing, and it had 7,000 people capacity wings on each side of the building going up, and
Wow.
it was the most surreal sight I'd ever seen. And I think that's kind of when I started to realize, hey, I could be in the mix here. I could
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
start. This could mean something, and that was in April 2012. Yeah, April 2012. Of
Okay.
course, it's the Olympic year.
Yep.
Oh dear me. Yeah, and then I went to regionals that year, which is
Yep.
another meet we rest for. So a tapers where like we reduce the amount that we do.
Yep.
So say I was doing like 30, 40K a week, I would start doing more race pace stuff and take the sting out of the amount of sessions I was doing.
Okay.
And I tapered for that meet, and I went 2:05, but slower than I did at that competition. And then I went to nationals that year, and I got to the semi-finals, and I came 11th in a 2:05 again, and I didn't PB. And at this point, I was starting to like question everything. I was like, what's going on? Why
Yep.
why am I like not doing this? And I remember being sat downstairs, and I talked about my dad being a lot involved in the sport, and like
Yep.
I remember just being sat with my mum and being almost in tears because I didn't want to go to swimming. I really, really didn't want to go. And I was like, Mum, I think I might be done.
Right.
And she was like, wow, right, okay. And I remember I didn't swim that night. And she was like, you just take it step by step, take it day by day.
Yeah.
Just see how you feel tomorrow. And like I think that was the only night that she was supposed to take me to swimming. Normally my dad would take me. And I don't know if my dad knew or not. I can't remember that bit of the story right now. But yeah, I remember going down the next day, and I had a really nice session. And at this point, I started training once a week in Bournemouth as well, as I talked
Okay.
about the 70-mile
Yeah.
round trip, because one thing my club couldn't do is offer mornings.
Right. Okay.
So I started doing one there, and basically the club had taken me so far, the Tornadoes had, but I realized I couldn't. The reason I was upset, and in those couple of days, I kind of created like this criteria for if I ever wanted to quit the sport again, what I would kind of view it through, what
Okay.
lens I'd view it through. First question always, am I enjoying it? Am I
Yeah.
having fun? Okay, answer at the moment's no. But so I say at the moment, okay,
Yeah.
why is that?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm not progress. What does it feel like? Am I not progressing? Like, am I actually not happy, or am I not happy currently with the situation, and it can get better? And then I would go through these criteria, and I'll answer the questions myself, and I'll be like, well, at the moment, I'm frustrated. I'm not progressing. Right? What
Yeah.
do I do about this?
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I then decided that I wanted to fully move to
Okay.
Bournemouth
Yeah.
just to try something new, because I had more training partners up there,
Yeah.
who were actually able to push me on a bit more. And yeah, luckily we was able to do that. We was able to get into a ring of like there was 3 swimmers that moved, and we all managed to like car share and stuff for that entire year.
Okay.
And yeah, it kind of like, yeah, that's why, like, up until now, the reason I bring that criteria up is because I reckon there's probably been 5 or 6 times
Yeah.
where I've seriously sat down over the course of like a week or so,
Yeah.
and I've gone, I'm not enjoying this.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this actually permanent? What can I do to change this? And it's kind of helped me be able to stay in the sport for as long as I did, and like
Okay.
that's what I really attribute that down to. So
Yeah. So is it
yeah.
is it also important to have, like, say, the right team around you as well? So having so I know you was training at the City of Sheffield swim squad as well,
Yeah.
wasn't you? And I know
Hmm.
I read that you had your trainer was Dan Cockin at the time.
Hmm.
You had like a nutritionist, Laura Sanford, and then you had like your psychologist and S&C kind of coach.
Hmm.
And you mentioned that they'd been phenomenal for you. So do you say it's
Hmm.
it's quite important to have that right kind of team around you to kind of support you on the times that are really kind of tough, and to kind of take you onto like kind of the next kind of stage as well?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, absolutely. First off, I just want to start by saying everyone at the City of Sheffield, like, who helped me on my journey, is an absolute saint. And, I know that I was probably a bit of a roller coaster, but I hope I always brought the same version of myself to the pool, the one that
Yeah.
just wanted to get better. But yeah, like there's been some extraordinary people on my journey who've helped me get through it. And yeah, I think that I think the toughest part about being in Sheffield was I moved from Bath,
Yeah.
because things weren't working, and like, I was in a really difficult position with British Swimming as well,
Okay.
where I was in that between zone of being good enough to make funding but not
Yeah.
really showing the progression, which is what they were after.
Okay.
And in 2017, I'd ask myself the questions again, like, am I happy? Am I doing this right? What could I do better? And I kind of identified at the time that the thing that I kind of felt like I needed was some, like, maybe psychological support. And
Okay.
like, and I also wanted to change things with my coach, because I felt like what was happening was, when I was getting to these big competitions as more of a known quantity, I was starting to like bottle it. I was starting to like lose myself to my emotions. And it was becoming ever more frustrating when trying to do my best performances.
Okay.
And yeah, basically, I had a word with the British Swimming people about moving into I was in the university group,
Okay.
and there was the option to go into the intensive training center. But they gave me a target that kind of was against what I'd kind of said to them. But they gave me a target to swim at the World University Games that year, which I didn't quite achieve. So I
Okay.
so I kind of had to stay where I was or move. and that's what prompted my move. And again, like, I looking back on it, I don't think that whatever we were doing in Bath was wrong. I think it was amazing, and I think the
Yep.
years that I had with Mark Skimming there, and the successes we had. I mean, he was the coach who got me to the European bronze medal, to the Commonwealth final.
Yep.
That year as well, when I made those two teams, was unbelievable. I've never had a year like it. But I think one thing that I'd had at that point was my career was all linear, and I
Yep.
wasn't prepared for when things went wrong.
Okay.
And I think I really struggled to get my head around what I was actually supposed to do in those
Yeah.
times. And looking back on it, I now know that, but I didn't understand that at the time. And I think,
Yeah.
again, coming back to the mentor, and this is why I mentor now, because
Yep.
whoa, these are all the pitfalls that I fell into. Don't
Yep.
make the same mistakes I did, or
Yep.
learn from what I learned from,
Yep.
basically. And yeah, I moved to Sheffield because there was a really great coach up there who I wanted to work with. And there was I was really, really wanting to work with him. And also the training group they had, I was a 400
Yep.
and 1500 freestyler, and they had someone called Nick Granger, who's part
Okay.
of the 4x200 meter not Olympic team, World Championship winning gold team in
Yep.
2015 and 17, who was a 400-meter freestyler who was incredible. They had people who were going very, very close to my times, whereas normally I was like head and shoulders above in my
Yeah.
training groups, and it changed everything. And mainly the reason I moved. I also wanted to work with this coach called Russ Barber,
Okay.
and yeah, and I came up there, and that first few months, it wasn't with Russ, as you said, it was with Dan Cocking.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was taking over while Russ was off with sick leave, and it was the most incredible few months I think I've ever had, because they just knew what they had this sense of, like, even though Russ wasn't there, they
Yep.
were putting like the videos and the video analysis of the technique points I was working on into a group chat, which was then going off to the head coach, who was still commenting on it, even though he was on
Yep.
sick leave. And
Okay.
they were pointing out their own expert opinions. And, the nutritionist at the time, it wasn't Laura at this point, it was someone called Andrew Shepherd,
Okay.
who also had a great swimming knowledge. He was a really good 200 backstroker, British champs finalist as well. And yeah, he was one of these, like, yeah, all of these people just contributed to make this incredible environment. And, like, yeah, it was incredible. I don't know how else really to put it, but yeah.
So when you kind of look back on your career and the
Mhm.
journeys that you've kind of had, both kind of physically and kind of mentally,
Yeah.
would you say that climbing the mountain has been worth the view for you then?
Um, yes, but it did come at a cost as well.
Yep.
I do fully believe that. And uh yeah, I think with the intensity of swimming,
Yep.
by the way, reminds me, I've got to go back to when I was 18. I've realized I flip-flopped
Yeah, no, that's
from the
okay.
story. I was supposed to tell you about that. But yeah, I would say up until the age of 19, when I was on this tremendous riding the wave,
Yep.
it was definitely worth it, because
Okay.
the success that came out of it was brilliant. But the thing with success is, they say that, like, they say that what Olympic athletes, what success looks like when you're looking at it from the outside, looks like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
normally, like, it goes like this, and then there's
Yeah.
like a line that goes all around here, and it
Yeah.
goes up, and
Yeah.
then it
Yeah.
finally recovers, and,
Yeah.
like, yeah, there's been some hell of a tough times in those situations leading up to it. And yeah, I kind of feel like COVID, like, took the sting out of me. And
Yeah.
it kind of, I can't tell you how good a shape I was going into those Olympic trials in 2020, and
Yeah.
then COVID knocked me. And it was never going to be so much of a fair playing field for me coming back, so I
Yeah.
kind of struggled with that as well.
Yeah. Did you get a shoulder
Because
injury as well before one of did you do a time trial in 21? I remember reading, and was you about a second off qualifying for the Olympic team?
Okay, so that story goes. so that story goes in 2020.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was in the shape of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd never ever had this mindset before. And like I'd worked with the sports psychologist called Zainab Atha,
Okay.
and she was unbelievable. And like basically, I always thought it was wrong. I was turning up to training in this year. I'd had a really rough year the year before. I was turning up to training this year, and I was wanting to be there like 10, 15%. And
Yeah.
she was like, "It's okay. When you're there, you're doing the best you've got, and what that is all you can do.
Yeah.
The fact that you're showing up every day is enough." And as I got through that and I started to come to terms with that, I started to relax with being in the pool. And every time I wanted to be there, I wanted to get that a little bit better, a little bit better. And as we went through, the 10 to 15% when I didn't want to be there, but I would still turn up, turned into I'm going to be able to give 50% of my best. And
Yeah. Yeah.
when I wanted to be there, I was back at 80, 90%. And it gradually kind of started coming up so that each time I was there, I wanted to be there. And she'd helped me come to terms with all my issues mentally and stuff like that. And I, for the first time ever, had this mindset going into that Olympic Games of going into that Olympic trials of everyone else, you can do what you've got to do. I'm going to hit that Olympic qualifying time.
Yeah.
The only way I'm not making it is I can't control what you guys are doing, but
Yeah.
you're going to have to fight like hell to beat me because I can't see it. Like it
Yeah.
was, I had this bulletproof mentality. And you know, my friends joke around, and like we had this weird scale based off my name, where like if you was feeling all right, like a 5, 6 out of 10, you were a J. But
Yeah.
like what they would joke about with me is, if you were if you were like a 7, you was a Jeremy, and then an 8
Yeah.
a Jeremiah. And if you were a 10 out of 10, you was a Jesus, which is basically what they were saying I was like was most sessions. I was
Yeah.
turning up and watching Jesus part of the sea or whatever. I didn't really understand it, but I used to think it was bloody brilliant. And yeah, so I was in this unbelievable shape, and then COVID hit. And
Right. Okay.
um when COVID hit, it was about 3 to 4 weeks before Olympic trials,
Yeah.
and it was heartbreaking. You know, I went home. I managed to get home just in time, and you go through the peaks and troughs of your motivation while you're
Yeah.
home. And I was at home, and I was like, right, okay, I can't swim, but I can run, so I'm
Hmm.
gonna run. The first 3 runs I did, bearing in mind I'd never run before, was like I went 7, 8, 11 miles in my first 3 runs.
Yep.
Then I did an 8 miler because I pulled a muscle halfway through and got injured, although I knew I was probably injured before I'd started.
Right. Okay.
And basically, like, it's just me, like, do you know when I talk about having my emotions in check? At that
Yep.
point, I was just so like, well, what do I do? What do I do?
Hmm.
And then I got injured, and I kind of like stopped running for 2, 3 weeks.
Okay.
But I kept doing my workouts. I kept doing the daily workouts that City of Sheffield putting on Instagram every
Yep.
day. And you know, you do what you can. And the first wave of swimmers was announced to go back in the pool in, I think it was June that year.
Okay.
So it was only 3 months, and I wasn't in the first wave. And I knew that would happen as well, because in terms of British swimming's way of viewing swimmers, I was getting old, I was getting older, and also I wasn't improving by their eyes. And I'm just like, God, if you just seen me 3 weeks, if I had 3 more weeks, you know, and I showed that first day, you know, then I'd have been back in that first wave. I really believe it. But yeah, and I missed a month then, and um, but I came back and I was still as determined as ever. And it was such a good training environment in that bit, because I was training in Loughborough, a place I'd never trained
Yep.
before. And I was swimming fast.
Yep.
I wasn't swimming as well as I was like pre-COVID, but I was on the road again. And then I haven't told you about this, but there was this league called the International Swimming League, which I went away to.
Okay.
And I was swimming part of the Toronto Titans. And yeah, it was a really, really cool meet where basically all the world's best swimmers gathered, and we had a
Okay.
5-week training camp in Hungary, where training / racing camp, where we would race once every week or something like that. Like at points it would be as short as like you'd have 2 days on, 2 days off, and then 2 days on again. Like it could be quite intense. But yeah, and I was just getting the best training in out there, and I was getting so confident again. And then, you know, I came back and I found out, and I could see while we was out there, we was in another lockdown. So I was trying to sort out my training when I came back, and I was told I couldn't train in Loughborough again. So okay, fine, I'll start commuting. Basically I then had to commute down to Northampton, and that was
Right.
the only
Okay.
other pool that I was told was open. And I remember being on the phone with one of the guys at the top, and he was like, "Oh, I don't think there's going to be a place you can stay that's within like a 3.5 mile radius." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'll tell you what, you go and have a look, and I'll go and have a look too, to see if we can find a
Yep.
place that's which is close to the pool." And he rang me back and he's like, "Jake, I can't find a place." And I was like, "I found a place. It's within a mile. I've already rang them up. They're going to give me discounts as long as if I keep coming back week on week to be able to
Yep.
do it, I'm going to do it." So I ended up traveling to Northampton, staying there 4 or 5 nights a week for about 2 to 3 months. And then a more feasible option opened up in Leeds, which was only a 25-mile commute, I think. And also I had a friend who was also going from Sheffield. So that was perfect. I could travel with him. And it
Mhm.
comes back to my epilepsy, why I can't drive and all that stuff.
Yep.
But on the very last session before going back to as I was going back to Sheffield from Northampton, my partner came and picked me up, and we got in the car and we were driving home, and I had a seizure in the car.
Wow.
Yeah. Tonic-clonic seizure, lasted about 15 minutes. And I already knew that I had them.
Yeah.
But it kind of came out the blue a bit. And yeah, it basically, like, to get me out of the way while she was like doing her emergency brake, she had to chuck her car in a ditch in the motorway. I felt so bad afterwards. Like, it was awful. And yeah, I had so she pulled the seat lever back, so I'd flung back, and my back was like spasming, and it was like that for about 2 weeks. It was
Right.
awful. And in the first couple of sessions I was going down to Leeds, I was getting in, probably doing about 500-600 meters, having to hop out so gently on the side, and it was awful. And this was, bear in mind, this was February and trials were in April.
Right.
I had about 8 weeks to go, and then the physio started giving me these exercises, and each day it started gradually improving. And basically at that point I was like, I'm going to have to forget the 400 free. I'm going to have to forget
Yeah.
the 1500 free. I'm going to have to just pick one event to focus on, because that's all I think I'm fit enough for now. I've had
Yep.
all these setbacks. I've had many times where I couldn't really get to the pool. Couldn't even swim properly when I was there half the time. And it was quite difficult, honestly. And the loneliest months of my life, no, the loneliest month of my life, or 2 months of my life, was that Northampton bit,
Right.
because no one was even allowed to pick me up on the way
Yeah.
to training. Like, I had to walk it because I wasn't allowed in anyone's car for COVID
Yeah.
and stuff. And even when I was at the pool, I was trying to be the happy, jokey self I was, but I didn't
Yeah.
feel right. I didn't feel the same person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I went yeah, in Leeds, I finally felt like I was that person again. And I was working with the coach who I spoke about, Mark Skimming being my coach
Yeah.
during the
Yeah.
2014 Europeans. He was the coach that led me up to it, but then I was looked after by a coach out there called Rich Denigan.
Yep.
And Rich is a phenomenal coach who I've always really respected. And he was all of a sudden my coach again in Leeds. And we had this rapport as soon as I got there, and it worked really well. And I remember we were doing these 150s fly. This was short course, in a short course pool, and 150 meters fly. And it was like, for time, we did two of them back to back. And I had the first week I went, whatever happens, this is my starting point. I'm just going to get better. And this was only 7 weeks out, remember, 7 or 8 weeks out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I went 133 and 134 in that first week. And I was like, right, that's my benchmark. And I'm just going to get better each week. The next week I came in, I think I went 132, 132 high, something like that. And then the next week it was 131, 132. Then the week after that, it was like, I think I'd skipped 130 and I went 129, 130.
Wow.
And then we started, this was now, we're only a month to go, and we was in the taper. And in that taper period, I remember I was going 126s. And all of a sudden everything just started clicking. And it was one of those, it was like once in a blue moon thing in a taper where you feel mint the whole way.
Yeah.
That never happens. Never. but I just felt really, really good. And I just said to myself, right, what have I got to lose?
Yeah.
And I went to this Olympic trials, and I did a 2.5 PB in this 200 fly. And yeah, basically the Olympic qualifying standard was 155.4, and I was a 158.0 before, and I went 156.7. So I literally halved the time.
Yeah.
And I just wanted that. I just needed another chance, and I really think that if I got a chance to swim at the Europeans, then I would have been able to give that a really good shot.
Yeah.
Especially the way I was training when I came back to Sheffield, because Sheffield opened up after the trials.
Okay.
And I didn't get a chance at Europeans to do it. I wasn't offered a place, and
Right.
I feel like that decision will haunt me for a long time. And like, but also like I've kind of just accepted that what I did going up to that point was flipping boss, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I've got to be proud of what I did, and
Yeah.
I can't beat myself up over things that didn't happen. No, that
Yeah.
I couldn't do,
Yeah.
especially when it's out of my control. But yeah, I genuinely believe that if I had the chance, I would have done it. But
Right.
that's life, that's swimming sometimes, and
Yeah.
I didn't get the opportunity. But
See,
yeah, it's such a roller coaster of a
it's
sport, I
such a
tell you.
shame for you as well because you speak, so passionately about your swimming. You can tell
Yeah.
you've wanted to like kind of do what so well and achieve so well and do so
Hmm.
many like kind of good races. And it's such a shame to kind of hear, like
Hmm.
you've said, it just wasn't to be on that last kind of race that you did.
Yeah.
Because it would have been an amazing kind of end to that kind of story, then, wouldn't it?
It would have been, yeah.
Unfortunately,
And I did still get another chance.
right?
We raced at this Glasgow meet, or I think I can't remember if it was Glasgow or Edinburgh. I think it was Glasgow. And I went there, and I felt I didn't feel right, and
Okay,
I knew it going in, but basically I'm not sure if we tapered enough or if we hadn't tapered. Like basically, like we tried to do the same training I was doing in Leeds
yeah,
and extended it through to Sheffield,
okay,
because we knew that was working. But basically, I think what happened was I was just too. My nerve endings or something were too fried, and I just wasn't quite able to replicate where I was at.
okay,
So yeah, it was a tough old experience.
yeah,
But these times and these situations, you learn so much about yourself. And
yeah,
like when you talk about the shoulder injury, like going
yeah,
into Commonwealth trials in 2022, like I had to. I had a I had a tendinopathy in my. I think it was rotator cuff.
okay,
And basically, man, I couldn't swim. I couldn't do a stroke of freestyle really for ages, and I had to have a month out. Right, I can't swim, but I can kick. Let's get
yeah,
my kick as good as I can. I can still go on an exercise bike, and I was on an
yeah,
exercise bike 3 times a week, making sure I was still keeping fit. I can still get something out of this time to be able to maximize my performance.
yeah.
And I know it sounds like a really long-winded answer to your, are you satisfied? Was it worth it?
Yeah,
And I think for the skills that I've learned from that, to
yeah,
be able to handle those injuries, to be able to handle that, I think hopefully that's going to be transferable for
yeah,
me to run in.
100%.
But yeah, the way that I handled that injury, was, I think, the best I'd ever handled one. And at that point, when I'd only been able to swim like 2K a session up until Christmas from October, um, did I think I was going to have a chance at making the Commonwealth Games team? Yeah, I did, because I fully believed that I was doing the right thing.
Yeah,
Um, but it's such a finicky mindset, isn't it? And like I
yeah,
was really like, I can't tell you how proud I am of myself of being able to handle situations
yeah,
like I did then. But yeah, so I still qualified. I still did what I had to do. Do I still think I could have achieved more with the sport? 100%. I think I really just believe that I have and had more to give, but
yeah,
now it comes back to the identity thing, and I think I was too much Jay the swimmer, and I wasn't Jay the person.
yeah,
Jay the the partner to my missus,
yeah,
the person who's got that life outside of it, and I'm still figuring that out now,
yeah, yeah,
honestly. And it's always going to be something that I will hold with me. And I'm in that limbo now of being I would call myself retired,
Yep.
but I don't want to announce it or anything like that, because I still like the option of being able to come back.
Yeah,
But I
definitely.
feel like to fully be able to come back, because I still swim, by the way, twice a week in
Yep.
Leeds. I still swim with Rich a couple of times in Leeds. But to be able to fully move on and try again, if I wanted to, I need to be able to let go of all those demons first, and I know that
Yep.
I'm not ready for that yet.
Right. Okay.
So
Well, I think throughout the stories that you kind of highlighted and shared with us there, it definitely shows the peaks and troughs of a professional athlete. And like you mentioned, it's not that linear kind of progression that people kind of think that you're just kind of on the up. There is the times where you've kind of peaked, and then there's a little bit that goes a bit kind of squiggly and might kind of plateau off a little bit, and then
mhm,
you have to kind of go again and find something again internally to kind of keep motivating you, and to keep kind of carrying on. And I
mhm,
think those stories definitely kind of highlight that.
yeah,
So
mhm,
so at the end of every show, we have a tradition, and I ask all our guests if they have any famous or favorite quotes or philosophies that they use on a daily basis. So, for instance, one of our last guests, we had Luke Joyce on, a
mhm,
professional footballer. He's made over 600 professional football league appearances, and
yeah,
he says he works off hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So
mhm,
basically, what he was saying was that he knew lots of footballers who was on the journey,
mhm,
who he says that were probably more skillful than him, were probably physically stronger than him, were more kind of skillful than him. However, they didn't have the right kind of mindset or mentality, and they couldn't almost deal with the setbacks.
yeah,
Um, Similar to kind of all the setbacks that you've kind of come across, and you've been able to kind of overcome them.
mhm,
So is there anything that you kind of like work off, or if you have any famous or favorite kind of quotes that
mhm.
you like to share with us?
I think the classic, because I think, okay, so I've got two. The first
Okay.
one's the classic because it's from my goat,
Okay.
and that's Michael Phelps, and he
Yeah. Yeah.
says, and it's the classic of don't put a limit on anything. I forgot the second part of the quote now. It's typical, isn't it? But yeah, basically, you can't put a limit on anything.
Yeah.
If you can believe it, you can achieve it. It's something along those
Yeah. Yeah.
lines.
Yeah.
And for me, my personal thing is um, be a little bit better today than you were yesterday. And
Yeah.
like basically it then comes down to the how are you going to do that? And
Yeah.
like it's the message that I try and get across so heavily in my mentoring, you know.
Yeah.
You don't have to make these amazing, massive changes
Yeah.
to be able to be better.
Yeah.
What you have to do is just keep doing what you're doing with good intent, with good
Yeah.
focus,
Yeah.
and just keep improving day by day. And that's
Yeah.
how you make the massive differences, you know.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's like the theory. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was Sir David Brailsford
Hmm.
who was on, and he was going on about the marginal gains.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a similar kind of theory and kind of process with that, isn't it?
Yeah. Hmm.
So yeah, right, very good, very good.
Hmm.
Um, so as we finish, what's next for Jay? I know you're currently training for the London Marathon, which you're raising money for Brain Research UK, which is an amazing charity to support.
Hmm.
We've also spoke about your athlete mentoring that you're
Hmm.
doing to try and kind of provide guidance and help to the young athletes along their journey, and so they can become the best versions of themselves as they can be. So could you just explain a little bit more about the mentoring service and what the future holds for Jay?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, with the mentoring service, it's always been something that I've been really, really passionate about.
Okay.
My I did a master's while I was in Sheffield Hallam University, and it was in sports psychology. And I
Yeah.
didn't quite finish the whole thing. I got the postgraduate diploma. Um, but my main thought process was I want to be able to help athletes.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I came out of the sports psychology area as soon as I did is because I wanted to kind of utilize my I wanted to influence the athletes I'm working with whilst I'm still relevant in the sport.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wouldn't be able to touch on any of the sports psychology elements, but what I can do is almost be that kind of like big brother kind of
Yeah.
mentality, that kind of, and it comes from the mentality of I wish I had someone to kind of help me through
Yeah.
my pitfalls when I was in the sport.
Hmm.
Like when I first got an injury in 2015, I will never forget, I was on a camp in South Africa with a completely different team, and it was week 1 of 3 at this place. And I'm not going to lie, I panicked. I
Yeah.
completely panicked in that situation and didn't know how to handle it. And I probably messed up that year because of it. And like, there's just so many things that I look back on, and I wish I'd been able to say, or wish someone would have been there to say, it's okay. You know, I can see you're really, really trying hard. Take a step back,
Yeah.
work on your kick, work on something else
Yeah.
while you're doing this,
Yeah.
and focus on getting that shoulder as strong as you possibly can. And now athletes, I basically just I want them to come to me with whatever they feel comfortable with talking to me about. And because no problem's too large or too small, when you're
Yeah.
a young athlete, because I work with athletes 13 plus.
Yeah.
When you're that young, the smallest problem in the world could seem massive,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
but that
To them at
doesn't
that
diminish
particular.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's any less significant, does it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of the mentality and the kind of focus that I've started this through. And like, yeah, being a little bit better than you were yesterday. And
Yeah.
it's about that self-awareness as well. How can you be more aware of the situations that are going on? And like, it's almost, this is going to sound really wrong, but when a meet goes wrong for an athlete at a young age,
Yeah.
I'm kind of almost grateful in a sense, because I can help them through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, okay, this meet hasn't gone to plan.
Hmm.
You're a sponge, you're 13, you're
Yeah.
14 years old. How are we going to handle this better next time?
Yeah.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
I was in the environment and I was just overwhelmed by it. It was too much. I felt like I had to be something better than I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, you've just got to be you. You've just
Yeah.
got to be yourself, and like coming to that realization, coming to those terms, I think is so important. And it's all kind of stemmed from that, and I love it. I absolutely love it, because seeing each athlete that I work with progress, improve. And hey, sometimes that doesn't even look like performance, because my most important thing is I want them to be happy and enjoying the
Yeah.
sport. I work with one lad who's a really, really good swimmer. He managed to medal last season at British Nationals, and he came to me at the start of the year almost in tears last year, because he didn't want to swim anymore. And it's like, okay, everything else stops. Forget
Yeah.
about performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
What can we do to help you right now? Let's do a pros and cons sheet. Like, how are we actually feeling about the sport? And then we break it down. And then, okay, if we've made it through that session, are you going to come back to swimming next week? Yes. Okay. Keep doing what you're doing, but maybe take a step back. We want
Yeah.
you in the water more than you performing.
Yeah.
And then I basically, like, a lot of the time as well, I talk to athletes about school. I talk to them about their life outside of school, what their
Yeah.
interests are.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm here for an athlete mentoring session. What? I can imagine they're going this in their head. I'm here for an athlete mentoring session. Why are you talking to me about blooming school and physics and all this stuff? But
Yeah.
because I want to know them outside. And
Yeah.
also,
Yeah.
like, if all I'm doing is talking to the swimmers about swimming, I
Yeah.
risk putting them in the same pitfall as I had, of, oh, swimming is everything,
Yeah.
and like, basically I'm using this as like a journey through how I think my journey could have gone better as well, and just trying to guide them, but
Yeah.
also like not trying to force my agenda on them, just letting them be them,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it can be a hard line to balance, but it's only because I'm really passionate. But I think coming from a person who's been there and done it is more valuable than, it can be than a parent saying the same message, because it's a different stimuli, isn't it? So
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
mm.
So Jay, thank you so much for being a guest on Elite Children: A Family Portrait. I'm sure the listeners at home can definitely see they're not alone on raising elite level children, and I'm sure it'll also highlight to everyone what's actually important in life, and not to take things for granted too much as well. From very, very briefly to getting to know you over the last couple of weeks and hearing your stories today, words like dedication, resilience, definitely passion. You spoke so passionately about all the stories in your swimming today, and the motivation that you've shown throughout the course of your journey kind of spring to mind. You're also one of the nicest guys that we've had on this podcast as well. You genuinely are a really, really nice guy. So I'm sure with a mindset and a personality like yours, any future plans or ventures that you get involved with will be a huge, huge success. So Jay Lelliott, thank you so much for being on our show. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Simon. It's been wonderful.